Welcome back, everyone, to our ongoing series, The Intersection of Technology and Culture. Thank you for pausing your DVRs and World Cup watching to check this out. Last month, we had a special guest, Darryl Joyner, join us to talk about the intersection of technology and education. Hopefully you saw that one. The discussion went so well, and there were so many questions that still needed to be asked. We invited him back for a repeat visit, and he graciously accepted. So let me, by way of introduction, Darryl, for those of you that don't know, is the Instructional Technology Coordinator here in Arlington County in Virginia. And by way of introducing him and beginning the discussion again, Darryl, I'll bring you on, and you can remind everyone kind of exactly what you do, and very relevant right now as the school year winds down. So Darryl, welcome back, and remind our audience exactly what kind of things you're doing.
Okay. All right. Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me back. So basically, Instructional Technology Coordinator, my main responsibilities are to help support teachers. So I partner with teachers to design instruction that makes best use of technology resources. So we spend generally all of our time integrating technology into core curriculum. And in addition to that duty, I'm also the lead ITC for the elementary ITCs. So we also work together as far as that team is concerned to kind of collaborate and bring ideas together to hopefully get out to the teachers and best support them.
Great. And so I think one of the things that I would imagine everyone got out of our last conversation, but one of the things that really resonated with me as it pertains to both this series and kind of the cultural moment we're in is the notion that technology at its best and sometimes worst is disruptive. But you really articulated something that I found fascinating, and it's intuitive, and yet it was kind of a revelation, which you really talked about the idea that not only do students have different methods of learning and understanding and kind of following instruction, but some of this technology, or all of this technology, is actually making it possible for similar lessons to be learned by different types of people. I think that's so exciting, and it really gives kind of some concrete evidence to the notion of it's not just a computer in a classroom.
Right, right. So the big emphasis now is trying to make learning more personalized. And so you'll hear the terminology that's probably most popular right now is one-to-one. I don't think that one-to-one is a very good way to describe the personalized learning, only because when you break apart the term one-to-one, you're just saying one child, one device. So it's this idea that those two things are coming together and somehow something magical is occurring. And it's really not the case. What we're really talking about is making a child's learning experience more personalized to them. So for years now, if you talk to any teacher or any administrator, they will all speak to the importance of learning being differentiated. So different children are at different points. They have different intelligences, different strengths. They need different sorts of support. With that in mind, we have found that it's important to have tools that are also just as nimble. So you can design instruction to be as flexible as you'd want, but you're going to only be able to go but so far. By leveraging technology and different technology resources, you're able to say, how can I even better meet that child's needs instructionally? That's the first part of it. Mm-hmm. But to carry that further is to say, not only that, but how can I find ways so that that level of dynamic instruction can also extend into their home? So when they're not necessarily with me, how can that same sort of learning take place? So what you'll find oftentimes is that a teacher will be doing a very good job of differentiating that instruction. But then when it's time for homework, everybody sort of gets that same standard homework. So it's we are missing that piece. And so having a device or some means to extend that learning is very important. But then also, lastly, so that we can say to a child, I just want to measure your understanding of the content. What's important to me is that you've grasped whatever the content is that I'm trying to share with you. As an instructor, I don't care how you do it. It doesn't matter to me what means you use to communicate that back to me. And see, that's where we see a lot of schools tripping up. Mm-hmm. We're turning schools into kind of like book report zones where everything becomes a book report. We study Boston Tea Party, write me a book report. We're studying photosynthesis, write me a book report on photosynthesis. Like, when really all we care about is that they've grasped the content. Now, of course, if for a particular lesson you are trying to assess their writing, then of course, obviously we would want something to be written. But that's only part of the time. We don't want to continue to give children the same grade over and over and over, and that's what ends up happening. So they have a difficult time communicating their understanding of the content because they may not be very good writers. But that same child who's not a very good writer is great musically, or is very good with spoken word, or very artistic, where they could share their same level of understanding through those means. But up to this point, we really haven't had a way to be able to address that. And now, finally, as we're seeing things like tablets and other sorts of devices coming into schools, we now have the ability to expand that notion and really sort of see it all come together.
Well, so I think that whenever there's results, that's usually what you can get for people to embrace either a technology or a new system. I would imagine one of the reasons that standardized tests have always been prevalent is because they're standardized, which
Right.
means they're easy to administer, they're easy to assess. But of course, the drawback, which has been a criticism that's been leveled at those for decades, is that they do tend to put people in a box. So people that are good test takers or have good retention skills are the people really learning that. So I guess the obvious question that I would ask would be, you would think that most teachers and students would embrace this, but I know with any kind of change, there's typically resistance. Can you comment a little bit on how are people, is there an older guard that sees this as really disruptive and I have to do more work now, and in the old days I could just grade a standardized test and my work was done?
Right.
Could you elaborate a little bit on how it's working in the classroom, both in terms of the front of the room and then the students themselves?
Sure. I think it's definitely safe to say, and at the same time, I think this is the nature of any sort of sea change, is that there's going to be a certain level of pushback or resistance. So, and this is no different. This is really no different. But what we're finding is a lot of that is based on a lot of misunderstandings. First of all, from the point of view of the teacher. And this is not new to the world of instructional technology. So I've been in instructional technology over 20 years. So the same sorts of conversations I'm having now, it's nothing new. And it's this idea of, I already have X amount of things that I already have to do. And now you want me to do this extra thing in addition to. And our challenge is to explain to teachers, no, we're not saying do all the same things the way you've been doing them. What we're saying is you're going to do the same things, but you're going to do them differently. You're going to do them more efficiently and in ways that make you more powerful and the ability to be more dynamic and to increase your ability to teach content to students. And so as we work with teachers and they go, oh, so I wouldn't do it that other way. No, you don't do it that way anymore. You do it this way. So what we're finding is at the onset, oftentimes, right at the beginning, there is more work. But what we're finding is a lot of that time investment ends up being a one-time time investment. So I now get myself to a point where I now am doing it this way, from this point forward, now everything is decreased. So what we're seeing is that additional time or that additional effort tends to be a one-time sort of thing that then carries on throughout. The other pushback that we have found on this case has been from the community and from parents.
Yep.
And once again, though, we're also noticing a lot of that is based on misconceptions. Like one of the things that I've heard parents say is, well, because in Arlington, we are doing we're doing expansions of our mobile device pilots at the second grade level in general, at the elementary level, in general at the second grade level. In middle school, it's occurring at the sixth grade level, and also mobile devices at high school at the ninth grade level. So the way it'll work here is that once the students go to the next grade, they take their devices with them, and then we replenish second, sixth, ninth again. Then they go up, then we replenish second, sixth, ninth again until we have personalized devices for second grade through 12th grade. So one of the things we're hearing from parents is they'll say, well, I don't want my second grader using an iPad all day. And what we have to say to them is, why would we do that? What would be the reasoning behind that? You know, like that really wouldn't make sense in terms of teaching your child, that you would be using the exact same instructional tool all day long. Like, why would we do that? So that's one of the things that has come up. Things like, and you mentioned standardized testing. So I've had people say to me, because I have been of the small group that's been placed, who's been made responsible for kind of designing what this all looks like, I'm part of that group. So I have to field a lot of these questions. And so one of the questions I've gotten is, well, where's the data that would suggest that using an iPad will increase student achievement? And for me, that's the wrong question. That's the complete wrong question. So if you think about it, it's not the device. It's the functionality that the device provides us. So what I will say is there data that would suggest that that increasing your access to reading material impacts student achievement? Absolutely.
Right.
Is there data that would suggest that teachers being able to better differentiate their instruction leads to greater student achievement? Absolutely. And on and on and on. So the question isn't, does the device guarantee achievement? No. Right. It's the functionality that the device brings us that speaks to being able to increase student achievement. So I think more so, it's more of an education job that we have to do for people, where they can understand that this isn't, people will say, well, you think that all you have to do is just put iPads in classrooms and all of a sudden everything will be great. No, I don't think that at all. As a matter of fact, if that was our plan, I'd be against it too. I'd be 100% against it, Right. So it's trying to understand the purpose beyond just this tool. Because you think about it, there are lots of tools in classrooms. I mean, think about base 10 blocks. Base 10 blocks have been in schools forever, but nobody says, I don't want my child using base 10 blocks all day. Well, why would we do that? There'd be no reason to do that, So this is no different. We're trying to get that message across, that what we're talking about is instructional tools. These are not toys or anything like that. This is an instructional tool that we plan to use in an instructionally responsible way, period.
Right, and I would imagine that some of the pushback again is a function of resistance to change, and I like to use the word sea change. I think that's very appropriate and necessary, because you really are talking about a paradigm shift, and again, we talk about this in this series when we talk about the music world and the book world. We're not talking about decades; we're talking about centuries of very systematic process that we've used to do a lot of these tasks, and teaching and learning being one of them. I think it's understandable that there will be pushback. I can also imagine that some of that resistance and suspicion is because some of these theories, at least ostensibly, seem so conceptual. Like, this is what we've read, and this is what we've heard, and this is what we're seeing. Right. But I can imagine that the clamor for data is because people want to be assured. I think especially in America, I think people want to be assured what the result will be before you actually do it.
Right.
So being intuitive and saying, doesn't it just make sense to do this? The students are more engaged, the teachers are more engaged. I do think you're at the vanguard right now, in people of your ilk and your profession. I think in 10 years this will be a no-brainer, or at least the embrace of these tools as augmenting the existing paradigms will be a no-brainer. But right now, I think you frankly are doing a lot of the heavy lifting to rise the level of expectation and awareness.
Right. We actually had this conversation on our team not too long ago where we were saying, you know, I'll bet you when we get to 5 years from now, nobody will remember this period of time where we had to go through what we're going through now. And, you know, the funny part about it is the world is changing. And I have to remind people of that all the time. This is not as if we're coming up with some notion that only exists in our minds. We're just sort of creating this idea that information is multimodal in ways that we've never seen it be that way before. We're just sort of thinking this stuff up and just sort of conceptualizing. No, this is the world we live in. And I don't think that we as adults sometimes even realize how much it's changed and how the way we take in information and the way we share information has drastically changed. Like, I'll give you an example. I write all day long. And sometimes I don't think people realize, you know, there was a time where we spent all of our time on the phone or talking. Now we write far more than we used to write. And there's a method in which we do this writing, and there's a method in which we do this communicating. Matter of fact, the way we're communicating now.
Right.
Like, this is something that's unique. Now, it's not unique in terms of the way the world is now, but it's a unique way of communicating. Well, this is the world our kids live in. You know, it's not just a grown-up world. They live in this world as well. They're very accustomed to doing things this way. And this gives us a lot of new functions and new possibilities that we never had before. Now, I will agree that if we don't spend the necessary amount of time designing instruction with teachers and making sure that they are using these possibilities in a way that works best instructionally, that if we don't spend time doing that, then that's all it'll be, just possibilities. We have a lot of devices that can do a lot of things, but we haven't really directed them in any way. But that's what we're working toward. We're working toward fully understanding all of those possibilities, all of those functionalities, and then saying, okay, in your classroom, with what we would deem those so-called traditional classroom practices, we're saying, how can we make this better? How can we change this in a way where your classroom and your approach are being completely transformed? And so that, to me, is what really classifies it as a sea change, because we are really saying to teachers right now, listen, you're doing a great job, but we want to come in and help you even be better. We want children's understanding to even be deeper. So it's like, yes, we're a high-achieving school. That's great. But does that mean it couldn't be greater? Or can we go farther? Can we do these things in different ways that we never saw before? Having students see possibilities that we may not even have noticed, where when I was designing this lesson plan, I thought of certain outcomes, and then as a result, my students go, wait, you know, we can move it into this direction as well, and have things occur that I never thought possible. I mean, that's the world we live in, and there's no reason why our classrooms can't reflect the world that we're living in now.
Right. I mean, a very compelling case could be made. It would be foolish not to. And I think when we talk about technology, there's always the notion of disruption, but at the same time, and there's always this tension between the two. There's always the opportunity opportunity. And what you're talking about, it seems to me, and what we talked about in our last session, are avenues of engagement and ways in which, so the instruction isn't necessarily changing. Kids aren't necessarily changing. Teachers aren't necessarily changing. It's the idea that ways that we were either to your point, not maximizing that proficiency in a particular individual. But to me, and what excites me and really makes me embrace this is the idea that all the people that all these kids we may have been missing and losing for just unavoidable reasons are now there. There's myriad ways that it can be catered to a particular individual, and what that leads to, as we touched on last time, and you elaborated on a little bit, the notion of building critical thinkers, and at an earlier age. I think we typically assume that happens in high school, if not college. And to think that we are sending younger people, who are able to exist in this world technologically and otherwise, because it's a cultural phenomenon, of course. You can't separate the cultural from the technological at this point in our digital world. But I love the idea of not only the opportunity to engage with people we may have written off, who of course typically will be our smartest citizens, but the idea that they're not only learning, but they're learning how to think and engage with the world.
Right. And, one of those ways is deciding, and this gets back to something we spoke about earlier, is deciding what is the best way for me to do this. Once again, as adults, we do it all the time. So if I want to go to the grocery store, okay, I make a determination, hey, you know what, it's a nice evening. Sun's going down, it's nice and cool, humidity's low, and I don't have to pick up a lot of groceries, so I'll just walk to the grocery store today. Like, I've made a decision about the best way to carry something out. That's a skill. That's a skill, as opposed to I'm just going to jump in my car every single time, no matter what, even if I just need to pick up some sugar, and the grocery store is a block away. Like, that's a skill to be able to apply that. And I am all for increasing the opportunities for students to make those kinds of decisions. We currently have, in our pilot now, there are some students, if it comes to something like math homework, okay, so it's not unusual for math worksheets to go home for homework. That's fairly standard. We see that a lot. But what we're noticing is, just because I'm giving you this worksheet doesn't mean the student is going to put pencil to paper and fill out the worksheet. We have students now who only do screen recordings on their iPads to do their homework. That's the only way they do it. And if you ask them, they'll say, because I'm finding that when I'm working on my math homework, if I'm talking myself through the problem as I do it, then it helps me to do the problem correctly. Well, that's a student who has a certain type of intelligence. Like, that child is smart in a particular way. And what works for that child, there may be another child who say, well, when I start talking my way through it, I start getting distracted, and it doesn't work as well as when I use pencil to paper. That's great. Why do I care that both of them do it in the same way? That's not meaningful to me. And we're not testing that. We're testing ability. We're testing knowledge of content. So even leaving it up to a child, to let the child decide what's the best tool for the job. By the way, there are going to be some students who say, you know what, I don't need to use an iPad for this. I don't need to do that. I can do this in this other way without the iPad. Well, once again, that's an important skill for a student to learn. We're really, really pushing teachers away from the old way of doing things in terms of, okay, everybody, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to study this subject, and at the end, you're going to make me a PowerPoint, or you're going to make me an iMovie. No. What we're going to say is, at the end, share with me what you understand about what we've done. Don't care how you do it. Write me a song, write me a poem, a photo stream, a keynote presentation, whatever it may be. You choose the tool that you think is the best way for you to communicate what you need to communicate. These are skills that need to be learned by anyone who's going to live in this current world, because we do that all day long, and I think it has just become what we do, and we haven't stopped and realized, wow, I've developed a new skill without even knowing it, because it's definitely going on right now.
Yeah, and I think any reason I don't think any reasonable person would have any objection to any of the things you just said. I guess to play devil's advocate, where does the rubber meet the road in terms of measuring? Certainly, if the teacher can say, "I'm satisfied that the student has shown, proficiency in this skill set or in this lesson," is that what we're moving toward, or is still at the end of the day, we're talking about means to an end? So a lot of people learn different ways. Someone using their iPad versus a pad and paper. But is there still a test at the end of the year where everyone has to take a certain test, or are we moving away from really moving out of these old paradigms where even testing and grades are more fluid than they ever were?
Right. And I think if you look nationwide, you'll see that there are a growing number of school systems that are moving away from the traditional standardized test. I think what they're finding is that it's creating undue stress on students. It gives us data, yes, and data is always good. In general, data is always good. But what we're noticing, though, is in some cases, the data doesn't speak to the way the child was taught. And the assessment isn't a very good match for the way the instruction was delivered. And so I think that's really what you're seeing nationwide, is that while they haven't completely gone away from it, because what we're talking about, it's complicated, and some of it borders on nebulous at times, where it's hard to draw a straight line. So let's say that we're going to expand our mobile device initiatives for next year, and let's say that the test scores, our SOL scores, go through the roof. Let's say like we've never seen before. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, a person like me, I'm going to want to say, see, it's a big success. Victory. But can I draw a straight and definite, tangible line between that achievement and that device? No, I can't do that. But what I think we can do is we can do what we've always done. And so what we've said is we're drawing a line between achievement and increased capacity, increased ability to do things in ways we haven't been able to do them before. And so I think you can draw that, but then at that point it's, well, is that because the teacher was great? Is that because there were a greater number of resources? Was that because we did a better job of leveraging the technology resources? And the answer to all those questions is yes. It's all of those things.
That's right.
Everything combined. So you can't draw that straight line to say this one thing is the reason, because it's not that simple. It's a combination of things. It would be like looking at an amazing house, okay, and saying, wow, I've never seen a house this beautiful. They must have had awesome hammers building that house. That could be true, but that would only be maybe 1/100th of the reason behind the way everything came together. So it's all involved, which makes it hard to draw a straight line to why things occurred. So, it's complicated. What we're doing is complicated, but I do know that increasing capacity and increasing the number of ways that we can meet children's needs, that's going to always win. There's no arguing against that, because if you think about it, that's how you get an achievement gap. So if you have a growing achievement gap, what that's telling you is you have a certain portion of your population that you're not reaching. So knowing that you're not reaching them, you're going to have to find new ways to reach those children. So I know that increasing those ways is always going to be a winner. So, and that's really what we're working toward doing.
Yeah, and I think to summarize, in a sense, we're talking about technology leading to opportunity, opportunity leading to engagement, engagement leading to aptitude, aptitude leading to data that ultimately in time will be both reliable and valid.
That's right.
I think always when one looks in hindsight, things that were very complicated and nebulous seem inevitable. And I suspect in 5 or 10 years, a lot of the story will have been written and will validate much of what you've been working toward. So on a closing note, looking to that future, whether it's 1 to 5 to 10 years, any predictions or expectations in terms of what we'll be seeing shaken up?
Wow. I think my number one prediction is in that amount of time, if we go 5 years forward, I think what we'll see is teachers delivering instruction in ways we hadn't imagined before. That is going to be the catalyst to all of this. If the instruction changes and the means by which instruction is delivered, as that begins to change, everything else is going to follow along. So I'm changing how I'm delivering, which also is going to mean I'm changing how you're receiving it, which also means I'm going to have to change in terms of how I assess that you received what I've delivered. So to me, the biggest thing, and I think part of this is prediction, part of this is deep hope and prayer, that if we fast forward, that what we'll see is teachers completely transforming how they meet the needs of children. And if we can achieve that, then I'll be more than satisfied.
Well, I think you're well on your way to seeing that happen. And on a professional level, I thank you again for sharing this knowledge and your passion. On a personal level, I really salute and endorse the genuine effort you're making to really bring about or hasten the arrival of this increasingly brave new world where we do have more engagement and more opportunity created. Ultimately, one must resort to a cliche. It's a win-win for so many people. So thank you for your advocacy, and we'll look forward to checking in with you again so we can hear what's new and see how things are going in the battlefield.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great. I appreciate having a chance to chat with you, and I'm very passionate about this, and I think we're going to see some great things.
Good. Well, again, thank you for all you're doing, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again in the not distant future.
Okay, awesome, Sean. Thanks.
All right, Darryl. We'll talk to you again soon then.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thanks.